Our guest today is a man with a lifelong passion for real estate. From earning his real estate license at a young age to launching his successful brokerage, he has made a significant impact on the Fresno metropolitan area with his work ethic and high quality services. Not only is he a respectable broker owner, but he is also a dedicated family man and community leader. He serves on various boards and committees, including the Fresno Association of Realtors and the Fresno Chamber Political Action Committee. He is known for always putting people first, and this is what has made him the community leader he is today. His educational background in communication, leadership, and organizational studies showcases his commitment to excellence. Please join me in giving a warm welcome to the exceptional Brian Domingos Jr.
Well, thank you. Happy to be here. What an introduction. Yeah.
I know she writes like these very elaborate introductions, and I always give her crap for it because I'm like, I didn't get an introduction as your like amazing co-host, and maybe someday I can get something that's like a paragraph. But no, you are an amazing person in the real estate industry, so we want to make sure that we do you justice.
The sad part about that is like I could only do so much in like the summary of who you are, but in learning more about you through like just the day and a half that I had to prepare and in meeting with you, it was like, you've done so much more though. Like you have so many other things that you've done in your past and committees that you've been on. You were on like the building plan committee, I think, for
Planning
Clovis.
Commission, yeah.
You were on another like fig garden specialty thing. And so it's just like, I would be here all day listening.
I'm out of balance. I think that right. I think that's what that tells everybody. But
no, that's awesome. So when did you start your love for real estate?
it really started as a kid. My grandfather was an investor. He retired young. He had some stress-related heart conditions, and they lived in Los Angeles, and he retired at 49 because he was afraid he was going to have a heart attack and die. And sold his property down there and moved up to Madera Ranchos and started buying little lots in Madera County and building Western homes on them. I don't know if you're familiar with Western Homes, a large production builder. And back then in the 80s, 70s, and 80s, they were all over the place. So he would build them, sell them, rent them out. And as a kid, I would go around to different job sites with him and check on them and look at the plans. And that kind of piqued my interest. My great-grandfather was a real estate broker in Malibu.
Oh my goodness.
And obviously didn't get to meet him, but have his National Association of Realtors certificates hanging in my office from 1950. And
very cool.
Just had some distant family in the business.
That's amazing. So your great grandfather, and then he passed it down to his son, your grandfather.
He was actually his son-in-law. So yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
And then it skipped a generation.
Skipped a generation. Yeah.
And then you caught on as a young child. How old do you think that you were when you finally decided like this is a career I'm going to pursue? I
got serious in high school about it, and I interned at a brokerage up in Oakers, Donna Pride.
Oh,
you drive up there, you see buy and sell with Pride all over.
Yeah.
So everything was red back then, or car or jackets or outfits or everything. And worked with her, and then I came down the hill, and actually not far from where we are right now, I worked with Dave Sawyer for a while.
Oh yeah.
In the 90s, we had a common connection and interned, and then got my license in 2023, about 20 years ago, I guess. And started working at 21 at a Century 21 office here.
Wow. Yeah. There's very few people that I meet that have like a license number that's smaller than mine. So mine's 014 and yours is 013. And I think in our office, the only one who has a license longer than me is Maurice. And he's, I think, also he might be a 013.
Okay.
I can't remember.
You're observant. I'll have to check that out.
Yeah, she always checks that. And it's so funny, right? And it's one of those things that you look at as a real estate agent. I think when you have someone who either writes an offer or you're pulling up on their listings, that's one of those things I go to now because of her. Like, okay, but how long have they been in the business?
It
kind of gives you an idea of like, okay, how
so
am I
the 3s are 20 years, the 4s are,
like the lower, I always tell people like, it's like a badge number. The lower the number, the longer they've been doing it. But it's really interesting. Sometimes I run into people that have like 005. So like a 01 is not even there. So I'm like, they started in the 80s, and that's really amazing to meet those people and talk to them about how it's changed. changed. It's always kind of been like a wild, wild west career where everyone has the ability, like we all have real estate licenses, but everyone can manage those differently. And that's one thing I was saying, off air, we have respected you for, because although we haven't had a ton of interaction, the interactions that we have had have been respectful, very professional. I think sometimes you can even like mistakenly be at the same property at the same time, and you get an array of reactions from different agents, and it's always just been a pleasure to come across paths with you.
I appreciate that. I feel the same way about you guys.
Yeah,
it's nice to do business with like-minded people, or at least know that we have colleagues out there, with the same kind of ideals about professionalism and ethics. So.
And you were saying, like, what does it say about you just having like an array of just real estate related stuff? But I actually love that. I didn't even think of a real estate career when I was a teenager, and here you are, like still staying true to that. I love that. Are you hoping that maybe your kids one day will kind of like follow suit and be a part of it?
That's interesting. I go back and forth on that. What we do is challenging.
It
And
is.
Some days, on the good days, I think, I'm hopefully building something that they would want to be part of. And other days, I think I'd just like to get to know what their interests are and help pursue and push them in directions that fulfill their lives. And if that's real estate, great. And if not, then we'll learn something new together by me kind of watching them pave their own way. So I don't really have real strong expectations for them in that regard.
And I think it's awesome when you talk about that, right? Because real estate, I think it's funny when you kind of see real estate on social media and like the perception that people get of the industry, and like, oh, it looks so easy, like they're out there just sipping coffee and writing offers and getting checks, and in reality, like the
driving
real life
up in their
situation,
Lamborghinis.
driving these fancy cars.
Television doesn't help.
But in reality, there's so much work, there's so much stress, there's so much focus on doing the right thing for your clients, and we find ourselves in so many positions where you're just like, oh my goodness, like you're a constant problem solver. And it's nice to hear people talk about like, hey, it might be great if my kids want to do it, but at the same time, like sometimes I don't know if I wish this on anyone, because it is a lot of work and effort and hours and stress. And how do you deal with that? Like, what do you do to kind of like wind down and kind of get your mind off things?
Yeah, it's funny. So this morning I got up at 5:30 and I hiked Pincushion up by
nice.
Millerton Lake. So lately I've tried to be real dedicated to my physical health to help with stress. And when I got back to the car and got reception, my son, my 8-year-old, had sent a picture of him impersonating me with my watch on and no shirt, pretending like he was a realtor, talking about all of his appointments. So it was funny to see him, impersonate me. But I would say the first half of my career, I was terrible at balancing stress, more than the first half of my career. I would say until the last probably 2 years, I've just started to realize that balance was more of a priority to me. And if I'm totally honest with you, my whole identity was being a real estate broker, right? So
I know how that feels.
I liked the external validation. I liked being a top sales producer. I liked having people tell me that I was good at what I did. And that's just, I'm just going to be totally honest with you, throughout this whole thing, that was validating for me. And then as you get older and you have more kids and you get married, and you start to realize that that's at a cost to the people that you care about the most. And when they start to say things like, gosh, Dad, it seems like you work 7 days a week, and will you throw the football with me on Saturday? Do you have to go show houses? When you start to hear those conversations, you have a choice. You can ignore that. And for a long time, I told my family that this was the cost of having a good life. We have a nice home, we have a cabin, we have, this, for me to provide for you, I have to work this hard. And when you tell yourself that, you don't have to change, because you are under the mindset that it's a requirement, right? And I don't think it is. I think you can have a good relationship with your family and make them feel loved and like they're a priority and still be successful. So that's a pathway that I certainly don't have all the answers for, but definitely one that's become more important to me more recently.
Yeah, it's something that we work on, I feel like, continuously. We have 5 little ones at home.
Yeah.
And same thing, there's so many times when you miss like an event, and it's so heartbreaking because it's important to one of your kids, or they ask you to be there and something comes up, and then you have this pendulum, like, I've got to do this to provide for the family, but at the same time, like, what good is providing for the family if I'm not there to witness like all the joys of their life?
Yes.
So we've tried to be more present for activities and be more disciplined with our schedule to make sure that we're not missing the important things. Yep. But at the same time, it's like, this is how we feed our family. This is how we provide. And if you truly want to be a good real estate agent, it takes a lot of time. Like, there's just no avoiding it.
Right.
But I like that you're getting into, being health focused. It's something that I've actually done recently as well. And I was telling Graceland, I was like, if we're going to continue to run as fast as we run, like, we're not spring chickens anymore. So we've got to be more conscious of how we take care of our body, how we take care of our nutrition. And I always tell her, like, I want to be able to be around for my grandkids. Like, I want to be someone who can play catch or, you know, take them to the park. I don't want to be so out of shape or so, you know, beat down that I can't even enjoy anything. Like, I want to be around. So really focusing on that, I think, is super important, like for just like longevity in general, and, you know, putting your priorities in order.
Absolutely. Now that I'm middle-aged, I feel it. Like, you know, I just had plenty of energy and never felt physically like I needed to worry about much. And as you get older, you start to realize, like, oh, there's creaks and bone cracks and pains, and, you know, you're tired faster and you lose track of what you're doing easier. So
or
all
thinking,
those things.
like, my brain is not as sharp, and and people are like, man, you have such a good memory. And I'm like, you know, when I was younger, I had a great memory. Like, I could, like, remember all the details, the house numbers, the street names, the everything. And then it gets a little more difficult. And, you know, the late and great Paula Connor, I worked with her, and she was at a place where she did not have to work anymore. And it was like, Paula, why are you here? And she said, it keeps my mind sharp, you know? So she just liked doing real estate because it just kept her going, it kept her sharp.
I loved Paula.
And then I loved Paula too. And then you were talking about Donna Pride and Dave Sawyer, both who are like great souls. You get them on the phone, they're just so kind. I mean, I called Donna the other day and she's like, hey, honey, and, you know, and, oh, not a big deal. Just very like down to earth. It's like, it's embedded in her skin almost, you know, this, like, she is everywhere in the mountains. And
still, so all these years later.
Yes. Yeah. We're like, there's Donna Pride. Let's see who has this listing. Oh, yep, Donna Pride. And that's actually where I met you, up in Coarse Gold. And so I called on one of your listings. Oh, by the way, congratulations on Moffett.
Oh,
beautiful home.
Thank you.
We were looking at the listing. We were scrolling through pictures, and both of our jaws were dropping. So if someone's in the market for a luxury
property, haven't seen, I'm looking at the camera beautiful. For this one. Yeah. You just have to search Brian Domingos' listing on Moffett, Moffatt.
Yeah, it's a nice one.
It is, if you're looking for bluff views, large, spacious bedrooms, beautiful. I mean, the things that you can do with that house during holidays, like that whole railing across the living room and stuff. I was just like in heaven. All the rooms are so spacious. You've got an optional 5th bedroom, swimming pool, jacuzzi, slide, play set, fully landscaped, over 2 acres, just beautiful property. So congratulations.
Thank you. I appreciate the plug too. It is a nice
you've
one.
got $3 million, it's calling
That's
you.
The one.
They say not to focus on like the whole price, because it's unlikely that you'll live there for 30 plus years or pay the full amount cash out of pocket. But the mortgage payment, you know, if you can get that mortgage payment to where you want to be, that's what you got to focus on. And if you can do that, use it as a trading card in the future. That's never going to lose its value because of its location.
I agree. It's a great property.
Yeah. So.
Beautiful home. So talking about that though, I think that's another interesting conversation, especially here in the Central Valley. Like, what is your mindset and thoughts on like the luxury market today as opposed to where it was in the Central Valley 10, 15 years ago? I mean, I don't even think we ever scratched like $1 million for the longest time. And now you see all these properties on the market, and the attention to detail and marketing that you need, the type of clientele, and understanding that there's just a smaller buyer pool for that. Like, how do you feel about those? Because I know you excel in luxury properties as well. So,
well, I mean, you have a very valid point. I remember the first decade of my career, I didn't sell anything near $1 million. I mean, $1 million was like a super expensive, very luxurious, once in a lifetime. And I mean, I don't want to say once in a lifetime, but certainly much less common than now. And, you know, now $2.5, $3 million properties are coming up a lot more than I would have ever thought in our area. And it surprises me, the strong demand that we have in the Valley. I mean, there's a lot of money in the Central Valley, and what you get for $3 million in the Fresno metro area compared to anywhere else in California is just a huge difference, right? So, you know, I think, we'll see as things continue if they'll hold, and we'll continue to see as much. I think we're probably pushing the limits on pricing in the Valley on that luxury end. You know, I recently sold a home in Cayucas for $2 million and could hear the ocean. So when you're doing the math and looking at comparisons, it's interesting to see that we have such a strong market in that luxury space.
Graceland, we missed it. He sold a house in Cayucas.
I sent you a house in Cayucas for $2 million.
That's where we would someday like to retire. Cayucas is like my favorite city in the world.
It.
Like we visit regularly.
Yeah,
I'm
do you know
such a huge
Brianne
fan.
Bull? Brianne Bull. So she joined Iron Key Real Estate recently, but she had a listing for 2.6 in Cayucas.
Yeah.
And I was like, we're not the only ones that love Cayucas.
Cayucas
you know?
is great.
I
think it'll
Cayucas.
be a great investment.
Yeah.
In the future. It's,
yes.
Someday.
There you go. It's always good to have that stuff on the vision board, right?
Yes.
Yeah, right? Definitely.
Yeah.
And so then back to Course Gold.
Yeah.
So there was a house that you listed up there. I had some clients who were selling their $1 million property with me. I knew they wanted to downsize, still wanted to be up in the hills. And I very much know them in the sense that what they wanted and kind of like the style that they wanted. And so that one had caught my eye. So I called you on your listing and I said, hey, it's just a preview. I'm not going to bring my clients or anything because I know them like the back of my hand. So can I go see it? You were like, yes. And I didn't know, I'm not sure. Was it a requirement for you to be there? Or?
Yeah.
Okay. So then you were there kind of like just walking around. I felt very comfortable in your presence. Like there are sometimes when, like I said, like every agent's a little bit different.
Yeah.
And sometimes you're like, this guy is kind of weirding me
Get
out. Yeah. But felt very comfortable. And then it seemed like you wanted to ask me something, but maybe weren't sure how to ask me.
Yeah.
And then why don't you just finish on what your thought process was when we were there on site? Did you know about our family, or like, did you know about... How did you know?
I had seen some pictures on social media.
Like that day you were like, who's this person? Or
No, I think I had some kind of an idea before. That's a great question. I'm trying to remember back when I actually realized that, looking at your family, that you had a daughter with Down syndrome. And we had just found out very recently, I'm trying to remember, we found out in October. So that had to be right around that time that our second child was diagnosed with Down syndrome and he was going to be born in April. And I didn't know anybody that had a kid with Down syndrome. And so it was kind of a far asking reach, but I felt like that they would probably be something that you would be open to. And I just had so many questions and had no clue. Yeah. So, I mean, thinking back to that time in my life, just the fear that I had. And I thought, I've read everything I can read on the internet. I'd love to just speak to somebody that I face to face and kind of ask some questions. So that's what prompted me, probably awkwardly, to ask you about your daughter and your family.
And it didn't feel awkward at that moment. I was like, I remember it being such a journey. It was only a 3-week time frame, but during that 3 weeks where we had the same, we found out very early on, I think I was 13 weeks pregnant when we found out we were going to have a daughter with Down syndrome. And I dedicated a lot of time in my senior year of high school to kids with Down syndrome. So I actually had a very strong connection, and I was pro-life, and it was an option to have an abortion. And they tell you can, abort as far along as 26 weeks. And for me, I felt like I asked for this, there was a couple times where I saw small children, like 2-year-olds and 5-year-olds, and they had Down syndrome. And I just had this longing in my heart to be a parent of a child with Down syndrome.
Yeah.
And I remember saying, like, I want a Down syndrome child so bad. They're just like full of love. And just my experiences with them, 3 of them became like, I took them everywhere with me as an adult. One of them became like my very best friend. He would leave me voice messages every single day. This is when we had like landlines with like voice messages, and he would call and say, hi, my very special friend. I hope you made it home every day, and so it was something that I already knew how I felt about it. Yeah. And Frankie, lo and behold, when I met Frankie, he has a cousin with Down syndrome. Yeah. And when he took me to the first family event, I was like, oh, like, you have a cousin with Down syndrome? Like, how lucky are you that you get to interact at this closely through your whole life, like all these steps? Because me, I only knew them as like teenagers or older. I never got to, for when I got pregnant, I wanted to know what they looked like as babies, like as infants, because I had us too. Like, we had never seen a baby with Down syndrome as an infant. Her tongue was like as big as her head.
Yeah, and it's one of those things.
Her whole face smiled.
To your point, right? Like, there wasn't a lot of people that were like advocating or resources, or you didn't have a lot of connections or family friends. Like, granted, I had my cousin, but it's still one of those like awkward conversations. And for me, I had like a completely different path because I was genuinely concerned, and I'm a very like analytical person.
Same. Yeah.
And I was really focused on like the enjoyment and comfort of her life. Like, what was that going to look like? What were the limitations were going to be? Like, how were people going to treat her? Was she going to have, you know, a long, happy life? Was she going to live to an age to where she could, you know, be independent? Was she going to have health issues? So
and
I really
think
struggled.
The scariest part is that they really cannot tell you the severity.
Yeah.
Right. So it's kind of like a gamble.
You have
Like,
no idea. Yeah.
do we trust, or like, I had a nurse come and tell me, like, there's no way you can do it, Graceland. I'm like, what do you mean? And she's like, you cannot be a mother of 3 and have a child with special needs and do all the career things that you're doing. And I'm like, well, why not? And she's like, your child can be in the hospital and need a feeding tube. And like, I see it all the time. You're not going to see your other kids. You're not going to be able to do this. And 99% of my surrounding environment at that time were all kind of on the same page with like, this is too big of a piece of pie to bite into for you. It's just going to be too much for you. It's just a lot. I don't think I can do it. And then I called my mom and she was like, you were born for this. And I'm like, what? Why me? I'm the youngest of 11, and my oldest child was grandchild number 43.
Wow.
So out of everybody, they didn't have like a missing pinky. They didn't have like any kind of disability at all. So it was like, why me?
Yeah.
And she said, because you were made for this. Wow. And she's like, think about it. She's like, I couldn't imagine any of my other kids being able to do this, but I know that you can. And so that, and also AJ Lakovich, he said one of the most beautiful things. He said, life's greatest gifts sometimes come in the silliest packages. And I loved that. And then finally I spoke with Dawn Suderman. She used to be my manager when I worked at D.R. Horton. And she's, you know, he and I actually sat down and we did like a pro-life, pro-termination. And I said, you know, because I felt so strongly one way and he felt so strongly another way. And so for 3 weeks, it was like war in our house. And in my mind, I would say,
strain on our marriage. It was strain on like just everyday life. Like, we couldn't really focus. Like, we were constantly at odds. We were constantly just trying to figure out like, what are we going to do? And it got to the point where it wasn't just about us. I was genuinely thinking about like my child who hasn't been born yet. I was thinking about my kids that are here.
He would say like, are you prepared to potentially bury a child?
Right.
Like, do you want to put yourself through that? Are you prepared for financial hardship? Because there could be a lot of things wrong that need a lot of attention, you know, surgeries, ongoing problems. Are you ready for that? And so we just went line by line, and his actually, he had a couple things left on his list that overpowered mine. So really his list, there was more things, and he's usually the smarter of the two because I'm emotionally driven. And so I was like, oh, okay, well then I guess this is what we're doing. I guess we'll terminate. And
then we had a doctor's appointment. And
wait. Okay. There was those 3 days though that I actually looked into it, and I started becoming very bitter, like at my own kids, where I would yell at them, like, if dad says you can be here and my other child can't, like, you should listen to me. Yeah. So I would, like, if they didn't listen to me, I'd get super upset with them. I had all that like bitterness.
You're upset,
you know, and there was a lady on the street who asked me for change every day. And like during this time, you know, we're saying things like, she will never be able to contribute to society. Or at this time, we don't know if it's boy or girl, but this baby will not be able to contribute to society. And so when this lady came and asked me like on the 5th day in a row if I could give her some change, I just went off on this lady. And I was like, why do you get to be here? You don't contribute to society. So my unborn child can't be here, but look at you, like, you're a piece of crap. Like,
you let her have it.
I unleashed. And I don't even remember like her reaction because I was just so at that point, like in tears, crying over something that didn't even have anything to do with that lady, you know? And so,
and it's crazy, right? Because, and it's actually those 3 days, it's funny when you talk about it, it puts me in a perspective in life these days. Like when someone is being like rude or very mean to you, like you don't know what they're going through, because it's so out of Graceland's character. Like she's never like that. She's like the nicest, sweetest person in the world. Right. But what she was struggling with, and like no one has any clue. And so I try to give people a level of grace. But yeah, we go. Yeah. We go through those 3 days. I'm like, I don't know if our marriage is gonna make it.
Yeah,
like,
and I could feel like, ooh, if this is like how it's gonna be,
this isn't gonna end well.
Yeah, then this is like gonna be rough on everybody. So it was the same thing. He was like, well, I'm gonna resent. So I heard him on the phone with his brother, and he was saying things like, I don't have a choice. It's Graceland, like I don't have a say in it. And I'm like, no, we're not gonna do that either. So it's really hard because we're both like, that's how like much love we had for each other, that I didn't want him to feel alone. But I also didn't want to be put through it, and he didn't want to put me through that, because he could see it was like eating me alive. Yeah. So did you guys have a similar experience?
We didn't. So the nurse practitioner for my wife's OBGYN was my oldest child's godmother. So a very close friend of ours. Her husband was a best man in my wedding. And Annie, my wife, didn't even tell me that she had done testing, and she didn't think anything of it. It was routine. She was considered advanced maternal age. She was over 35, and so automatically you go and you get testing done. And she honestly, we'd had one child, we'd had several miscarriages, but our first born child was very healthy, and nothing like that was even on the radar. And my wife called one day, and I'll never forget, I was driving down Palm and right by Fig Garden Village, and she said, what are you doing? And I said, I'm working. Why? And she said, you need to come home right now. Brianne called, the nurse practitioner, and she said, I think I have some bad test results from some blood work that I had done. And so it was a very short drive. I live in Old Fig, and everything that possibly could have gone wrong went through my mind. I was thinking the worst case scenario, spina bifida, what is it that this child has? And so we got there, and we were in the living room, and which was a very private, nice way to hear, in your own home, when you're sitting in your own couch with a good friend of yours who's telling you that there's a challenge or a problem with your baby. And we weren't in a doctor's office, and she said, I just want you guys to know that your baby's test came back positive for Down syndrome. There's a 99% chance that your baby has Down syndrome. And at that point, that was like winning the lottery, because that was the best case scenario from what I had gone through in my mind. Mm-hmm. It didn't last very long, the winning the lotto feeling, because I really appreciate how transparent you guys have been about how you felt, because I handled it very differently than my wife did. I was not happy. I was really upset. I couldn't believe that this was happening to me. This was not part of my plan. I did not want a kid with Down syndrome. I did not want a kid that I had to take care of financially and physically for the rest of my life. Although now I don't feel like I will have to. But so we had, and my first response was, well, we'll get through it, and we'll figure it out. And my wife said, well, let's have a conversation about this. Like, let's not, like, this is a decision that we're going to make together, and we're going to have to make have a conversation. We didn't do the pros and cons as much, but she's a therapist. Mm-hmm. So she's very, emotions and processing your feelings are really important to her. Mm-hmm. So she said, let's just take a minute. We don't have to make decisions. We don't have to talk about the future. Let's just take a minute and like process the news that we're hearing. Mm-hmm. And, so we did that for a while, and I read everything that I could read on the internet. Which
is not the most positive.
Terrible.
Yeah, the stuff that they give you, even at the hospital, like the information that they provide, and looking back on everything, the information that we were fed versus the baby and the person we have received.
Yeah.
Complete.
Oh, it's night and day.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I was like,
every kid's different no matter what, right?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And so you don't get that truth until you meet your child.
Right.
And we had made an offer on a house actually that day that we pulled out of because we were just in a tailspin. It was just not. It wasn't
wasn't the right time
on the calendar at all to even think about this. So I joined every group I could on Facebook. I was reading about people who were having kids in different countries with Down syndrome, which just filling my time with supporting the fact that I should be scared and that this was going to be a terrible thing. Mm-hmm. And my wife said, let's meet the kid. Like, I don't want to know about what you're reading on the internet. I don't want to join a support group. She really wanted to kind of just process it. And I wanted to talk to a lawyer about a special needs trust. And she's like, this is insane.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
We don't need a special needs trust right now. And I'm like, well, yes, we do. It says on the internet, we need special needs trust. And,
it says on the internet.
Yeah. And she was like, okay. So we were just kind of different, right? So then we had a couple people who had made some recommendations. Dr. All's house, I don't know if you've dealt with him at all. Children's Hospital had a biological child with Down syndrome and adopted a few more, and we met with them. We went to Break the Barriers
Oh, great.
and met other parents who had kids with Down syndrome. And we were in Break the Barriers at a board table, and other people with Down syndrome came in and they were walking around us, and they were, I would say, more severe. And a couple of them were nonverbal, and it wasn't a helpful situation. I'll say that politely, right? Like, and it was more scary and more terrifying to meet them and hear their stories and see their children. Where I was thinking that it would be a place that we would go and find comfort and peace. And we got in the car, and I don't know if this is an explicit podcast or not, but I'll paraphrase. My wife said, "I don't want to be part of this club. Like I don't want to do that. I don't want to come here. I don't want to watch our kid walk around in circles making noises with their tongue out." And this, it sounds terrible, right? Yeah. And I said, "I don't either. Like, we didn't sign up for this. Like, why?" So there's,
and you have a choice. Like, that's the hard part, is like, if you find out early enough, and then you have all these like doctors and everybody telling you like, oh, you can go to San Francisco and terminate up to 26. Like, you still have time, still decide, still think about it.
They're constantly like putting that in your mind though, which I think is unfortunate. And I think, honestly, I do feel like things have progressed over the years where it's not that case anymore, but and it wasn't that long ago for us, but I just felt like that was the constant like message you're receiving. So it gets you to continue to visit that. But yeah, I think I was right there with you. Like, I'm not sure if this is the group that I wanted to be a part of, or if I'm prepared for, or if I'm built for that. So yeah, I can totally
in the
relate.
1970s, which is not that long ago, people were being told when they delivered their child with Down syndrome that your child will never know who you are, your name, never learn how to write, read. They put all these limitations. And so then it's just like, you read that and it's like, oh. And when I was told, it was like 9 out of 10 people who had the diagnosis, they terminated, so 90% of people. Yep. And so we did go through like a long battle, but I think
and I think I wanted to kind of go back to that, because I know when we were initially telling the story how we found out and the pros and cons and going through everything, and then Grayson's 3 days of the terror that she was on,
and then I talked to Don Suderman,
and then so we go to this doctor's appointment, and I'm like, you know what, I'm gonna go to this appointment
because it was our number 4, so he was like,
I hadn't
over
really
it.
been to anything yet. It's our 4th kid.
Routine,
We've done this multiple times. Like, I know what these appointments are, and she's like, just come with me to the appointment. Like, just come with me to this appointment. Like, we're really leaning towards like, we don't know what we're gonna do, but just come. So we go to this appointment, and she's having an ultrasound that day. And so I'm sitting there, and the ultrasound technician comes in, and she hooks her up, and then she puts the little probe on, and I immediately hear the baby's heartbeat. And in that moment, like, the sheer like disgust I had for myself and the thoughts that I had prior to that moment, I was like so like angry with myself, because the second I heard that heartbeat, I was like, no, this is like my baby. Like,
and then, because in your mind, right, you're like, oh, it's so early on that it's not even a baby. But then he was able to see on screen his head, like his forehead and my toes and fingers and cute little button nose. And, so I'm pointing all these things out, and the doctor's like, she's got 5 fingers, 5 toes. And he just gets up and walks out. And I'm thinking, because he didn't say anything, he's so pissed off. He is so done and so over this. And so I'm like, I'm sorry. I have to go after him. Yeah. Can we, finish the measuring, and can I go? And I didn't know where he went.
Or what he was thinking.
What he was thinking or anything. I searched everywhere. Where did you go? You just walked?
I was out in the parking lot, actually. I just had to get out of the building. Like, the things that, like I said, how upset I was with myself, and I didn't have a way to process it, and I was like angry with myself, and I just needed to be out somewhere. Like, I just needed to clear my head. I needed to be like, everything that you've been fed, like all the information, like, no. And in my mind, just kept being like, this is your baby. Like, you love all your kids. Her heart beats the same as all the other ones, and maybe she's gonna have like a learning deficiency, but she's still your child, And it just kept going through, and the more that it soaked in. And like, just the strong like family that I come from, and how, even like my cousin and just my family in general, like how we care for each other. The fact that I had even had thoughts that we weren't going to have this baby, I was just so disgusted with myself, and I just had to process it, and I had to just get away, because I didn't know how to convey that to anyone in that moment.
Yeah. And it is a very alone feeling, I think. When you're trying to process what it means for your future, when you're having a baby that doesn't have, quote unquote, any disabilities, it's easier to talk to parents and get a feel for what life's going to be like, right?
And so right around that time, I had talked to Dawn Suderman, who was the manager at DR Horton, and I said, his list is longer than my list, and and I said I would, but I'm not really sure how to explain like what is in my heart right now, because I want to support my husband, but I also don't feel like I really know what to do. And so she said, I'm going to pray on it and I'm going to call you back. And she's very, faith forward. And so she called me back and she said, life isn't something that you can just write out and your wishes and it come true. So she said, and the other thing is that when you go and stand on Judgment Day, he's not going to say, oh, because Frankie did it. It's your choice. And, Frankie's not going to be there to take the credit or blames for you. So she said, I also want you to think about that everything happens for a reason. And if, God forbid, something happened to one of your children, would you have wished that you didn't have that child? I'm like, no. And she's like, so when you found out that you were pregnant, you accepted this child. I saw you on social media saying baby number 4. It's already part of who you are. It's already your family. And you're saying because it has a disability, you may sway one way or the other. But I'm asking you, how would you feel? Like, what does unconditional look like for your other kids? Would it change, if they got in a car accident and they were in a wheelchair, would you say, I wish I never had them, or I wish, I don't love them because this happened to them? And I was like, no. And she said, it's the same. And then same thing, like going along. So then we both agree, he's like, I respect any decision that you wish. I accept this child. And I said, I accept this child. And so we had a firm decision at that moment. Okay, this child's going to be a part of us. So let's just best prepare as we can. But as I got closer to delivery, I started getting more nervous and more nervous because I was like, wait, I'm going to be a special needs mom. I have to be special. Right. And this child's going to need a lot more. And I remember I was like 8 months pregnant and I go into some center down there that I was referred to, and there was a mom. She's like, I don't understand. What's the big deal? You have other kids, right? And I'm like, yes. And she goes, so you just love this kid like you do all your other kids. You want for this kid what you want for your other kids. So, because I'm like, do I have to target better school districts? Do I have to, look at programs? What do I, I'm thinking of all these things. But one thing I did notice is that the families that typically have a Down syndrome child in their family have siblings who are in the medical field. Did you notice that? Like, typically they take some sort of like...
I haven't. I've just noticed how loving my kids are because of their
brother. Yeah.
And like our
so
little...
close. Like our son, who's right above Peanut, and then our daughter, who's below Peanut. She thinks that Peanut is amazing.
Yeah, tries to do everything that Peanut does.
Oh, yeah, it's totally tight.
And we say Peanut, her name is Ayana, but she was born in my pants. I'm not sure if you ever wondered why do they call her Peanut. And the nurses, because she was born in my pants and she was only about 5 pounds, they were like, she was just like a little peanut in your pants. And so when for 2 days, they kept calling her Peanut. And so that's how she got the name Peanut.
Yeah, full on in her pants as we wheeled her into the emergency room.
She was
like,
2
we barely
weeks
made
early.
it into the hospital.
Wow.
We didn't even make it into the emergency room tables. So I was totally confused.
Yeah, he went out to go park the car. So
because I wheeled her in. I felt like you can't park there. So I ran and parked, and then I ran back, and I walked in, and Grayson has this baby on her chest, and I'm like,
whose baby is that?
Yeah, I'm like, whose baby? And she starts laughing. I'm like,
it's your baby.
I'm like, what happened?
Yeah.
She's like, I had her in my pants. I'm like, what? What are you talking about? And she was giving me crap before on the way to the hospital because she's like, I need clothes. The baby's coming, and I gave her like these tight athletic pants, and she's like,
the tightest, like first trimester
pants. And we're like driving to the hospital, and I'm going crazy, and she's like yelling at me, though, I can't believe you got these pants. Like, what did you think I was like? I'm not going to the gym. And then because the pants were so tight when she had the baby.